I'm 84 years old, and I'm from the United States, and no one prepared me for this part of aging. People think aging is something you feel in your body first, your knees, your back, your balance. That's what they warn you about. They don't warn you about the moment you realize the world has already adjusted to your absence, because that doesn't arrive with pain, it arrives with silence. I didn't wake up one morning feeling old. I woke up noticing that nothing was waiting for me. No messages, no requests, no problems that needed my experience. And that realization didn't scare me at first. It confused me. For most of my life, my place in the world was obvious. I didn't have to think about it. I belonged somewhere because something depended on me. I worked most of my adult life, long enough that my routines became part of other people's routines. My decisions mattered. My timing mattered. If I didn't show up, something stalled. That creates a certain posture inside you. You don't feel important, you feel necessary, and necessity has weight. Even after I stopped working full-time, that feeling didn't disappear right away. People still called, still asked what I thought. They'd say things like, "You've been through this before." That sentence anchored me. It told me my past still had value in the present. Then slowly, it stopped being said. Not because anyone announced it, not because something went wrong. It just didn't come up anymore. At first, I didn't notice. Then I noticed and explained it away. I told myself people were just busy, that the world was moving faster now, that it wasn't personal. But aging has a way of making patterns hard to ignore. The calls became shorter. The questions stopped being real questions. Sometimes people would already know the answer before asking. Sometimes they weren't really asking at all. They were being polite. Politeness is a strange thing when you're old. It looks like respect from a distance. Up close, it feels like containment, like being placed gently on a shelf. I didn't lose my mind. I didn't lose my judgment. I lost the environment where those things mattered. No one prepares you for that kind of loss, because it doesn't look like loss. You're still alive, you're still capable. You just don't belong to the flow anymore. I started noticing it in small, almost embarrassing ways. Meetings where I was invited but not really included. Conversations where my input arrived after the decision was already made. Technology I could understand if I tried, but no one bothered to walk me through. They assumed I wouldn't want to learn. That assumption hurts more than ignorance ever could. It tells you that curiosity has an expiration date. I wasn't angry. That's important. I didn't feel betrayed. I felt misplaced, like a piece from an old set that still exists, but no longer fits anywhere. People told me this was freedom. Enjoy it, they said. You don't have to worry anymore. But what they meant was, you don't have to matter anymore. They didn't say it that way. They didn't intend it that way. But that's how it landed. They didn't intend it that way, but that's how it landed. There's a difference between rest and removal. Rest comes after effort. Removal comes when you're no longer part of the equation. I began filling my days with small tasks, fixing things that didn't need fixing, reorganizing spaces that were already fine, motion without consequence. It kept my hands busy. It didn't answer the deeper discomfort. Because the discomfort wasn't about boredom, it was about usefulness. I had never learned how to exist without being needed. Not because I was insecure, because I had always been functional. That was my language. If something broke, I fixed it. If something stalled, I moved it forward. But now, nothing stalled without me. Nothing waited. And that's when the questions started forming. Slowly, uncomfortably. If the world doesn't need what I know anymore, what am I supposed to do with it? And even harder than that, Who am I when nothing depends on me? That's the part of aging no one warns you about. I didn't understand it at first. I thought what I was feeling was just rest. People kept telling me I'd earned it. Earned. That word sounds generous, but it comes with an ending built into it. You earn something when the work is over. No one tells you how disorienting it is when the work ends and you're still here. For most of my life, I knew exactly where I stood because I knew what I was responsible for. There were deadlines. There were people waiting on my call. There were decisions that didn't move without my name on them. That structure gave my days a spine. Then, slowly, without any announcement, that spine softened. It didn't happen all at once. That's the part that fools you. First, meetings where my opinion was acknowledged but not needed. Then phone calls that came later, after things were already decided. Then conversations where people filled me in instead of asking me in. None of it felt hostile. That made it worse. It was polite, considerate, efficient. I was being removed gently. At 84, living in the United States, people don't push you out. They thank you out. They tell you you've done enough. They tell you to enjoy yourself. They tell you to take it easy. What they don't ask is whether you still want to be necessary. I started noticing how often people finished my sentences for me. Not because I was slow, because they assumed the ending already. I noticed how my stories were received with smiles, not follow-up questions, as if they belonged to a different room than the one we were standing in. I wasn't offended. That came later. At first, I was confused. I kept waiting for something obvious to explain the shift. An illness, a mistake, some failure I could point to and say, that's why. But nothing was wrong. That's what made it hard to name. My body still worked well enough. My mind was still sharp. I still paid attention to the world. The world just didn't pause for my attention anymore. There's a difference between being ignored and being bypassed. Ignored feels personal. Bypassed feels procedural. You can't argue with a process. I found myself standing in places where I used to belong, feeling oddly surplus. Like extra inventory no one wanted to throw away, but no one needed to stock. I'd watch younger people handle things I used to handle, and I'd see them do it fine. Not better, not worse, just fine. That's when the unease really settled in. If I'm not essential, then what am I? No one prepares you for that question. Not when you're young, not when you're successful, not when you're doing everything right. We prepare people for decline. We prepare them for loss. We prepare them for grief. We don't prepare them for being intact, but unnecessary. There were days when I tried to insert myself back into relevance, offering advice no one asked for, volunteering opinions already outdated. I could hear it in my own voice when I did it, that reaching tone, that need to prove I still had something to offer. I didn't like that version of myself, so I stopped. And that's when the quiet became louder. Without the constant friction of usefulness, my days stretched in unfamiliar ways. Hours didn't resist me anymore. I'd finish something small and realize there was no next thing waiting, no pressure, no urgency. At first, that felt like relief. Then it started to feel like erosion. When your life has been built around contribution, absence of demand doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like disappearance in slow motion. I started asking myself questions I had never needed to ask before. Not big philosophical ones, practical ones. What do you do when no one is waiting for your output? Where do you place your attention when it's no longer required? I didn't have answers. That scared me more than I expected, because it meant this wasn't about age in the simple sense. It was about identity losing its anchor. I realized something uncomfortable during that time. I had spent decades defining myself by impact, by usefulness, by being part of the mechanism. No one had warned me that mechanisms evolve without sentiment. They don't miss you, they just keep working. That realization didn't make me angry, it made me small. Not insignificant, just reduced. And reduction is hard to grieve, because nothing was taken from you. It was simply no longer assigned. I began to understand that this was the part of aging no one talks about because it doesn't photograph well. There's no dramatic before and after, no hospital room, no goodbye speech. Just a gradual realization that your presence has become optional. And once you notice that, you can't unnotice it. That awareness sat with me, unresolved, heavy but quiet. And it forced a deeper question I wasn't ready to answer yet. If the world no longer needs me the way it used to, what am I supposed to need myself for now? If the world no longer needs me the way it used to, what am I supposed to need myself for now? That question didn't come with urgency, it came with space. Space I wasn't trained to recognize. Space without instructions. For a long time, I tried to answer it the same way I had answered everything else in my life, by doing something useful. I volunteered advice, I offered help, I looked for places where I could still fit myself into a role. Sometimes people accepted, most of the time, they didn't really need it. That rejection wasn't sharp, it was mild, polite, which somehow made it harder to push against. I realized I had spent decades letting demand decide my direction. When demand vanished, so did the map. Days started to blur in ways I wasn't used to. Not because I was confused, because nothing was pulling on me anymore. I'd wake up and feel alert, capable, ready, and then notice there was nowhere specific to apply that readiness. That mismatch created a low-grade tension I couldn't name at first. I wasn't lonely in the obvious sense. People still knew me. They still greeted me warmly. But warmth isn't orientation. What unsettled me most was how invisible the shift had been while it was happening. No ceremony, no marker. One day I was part of the current. Then, without realizing it, I was standing on the bank, watching it move. I began noticing how often I framed my days around avoiding that awareness. Extra errands, unnecessary errands, anything that made the hours feel occupied. Occupation had always been my proof of worth, but activity without consequence doesn't satisfy for long. There were afternoons when I'd sit down, not tired, not bored, just unclaimed. And that was new. I'd spent my life being claimed by something, a job, a responsibility, a timeline. Now the only thing claiming me was time itself. At first, I tried to treat that as a luxury, something I was supposed to enjoy. But enjoyment requires appetite, and I realized I didn't know what mine was anymore. I had been fed by necessity for so long that desire felt unfamiliar. That scared me, not because I wanted more from life, but because I couldn't tell what more even meant now. I caught myself waiting again, the way I used to wait for instructions at work, waiting for someone to tell me what mattered next. No one did. That's when it became clear this wasn't a social problem. It was an internal one. The world hadn't taken something from me. It had stopped assigning it. And assignment had been my entire structure. I started paying attention to how I spoke about myself, always in the past tense, always in reference to what I had been. I realized how rarely I used the present tense without attaching it to a task. I am had quietly become I was. That realization didn't hurt immediately. It sank in slowly, and with it came another uncomfortable truth. I had never practiced being with myself unless I was being useful. Stillness wasn't rest for me, it was exposure. Without roles, without deadlines, without people waiting on outcomes, there was nowhere to hide from the question anymore. so I stopped trying to answer it. Instead, I let it sit. And sitting with a question without solving it turned out to be harder than any job I'd ever done. If the world no longer needs me the way it used to, what am I supposed to need myself for now? That question didn't ask for an answer right away. It just stayed nearby. I tried to outrun it at first. I filled the days with structure I borrowed from my old life. Wake up early, read the news, make lists. Lists have always made me feel grounded. They turn time into something you can point at. But I started noticing something strange. I would finish everything on the list before noon, and there was no satisfaction in crossing things off. Completion without consequence feels hollow. In my working years, finishing something meant something else could begin. A decision unlocked another decision. A result created motion. Now, completion just meant quiet. I realized I had never practiced choosing things for no reason other than interest. That skill had atrophied without me noticing. I stood in rooms filled with books I had always meant to read, projects I had postponed because they weren't urgent, ideas I once said I'd return to when things slowed down. Things had slowed down, but I didn't know how to enter them. Urgency had been my permission slip. Without it, I felt exposed. There's an embarrassment in discovering that freedom feels heavier than responsibility. No one warns you about that. I began paying attention to how often I reached for validation without realizing it. How often I told stories just to see if someone still leaned in. How often I explained myself when no explanation was needed. That's when I saw it clearly. My sense of self had been externally indexed. I knew who I was because others reflected it back to me through need. When that mirror disappeared, so did the outline. This wasn't depression, it wasn't despair, it was disorientation. I wasn't lost, I was unassigned. And being unassigned at 84 feels different than it does at 24. There's no expectation of reinvention, no applause waiting if you find a new path. There's just you and the time. I started sitting with that instead of trying to solve it, not meditating, not reframing, just noticing what surfaced when nothing was required of me. At first it was irritation, then restlessness, then something close to grief. Not for what I had lost, for what I had never practiced being. A man who exists without a function. That realization hurt in a quiet, private way, because it meant I couldn't blame the system entirely. I had participated in my own disappearance by tying my worth to usefulness alone. No one prepared me for this part of aging because we don't talk about it honestly. We talk about staying active, staying sharp, staying positive. We don't talk about what happens when staying relevant stops being an option. I'm still capable, I'm still thinking, I still notice things, but the world no longer organizes itself around my contribution. That's not an injustice, it's a transition. And transitions require a different kind of courage. Not the courage to push, the courage to stay present without applause. I don't have a solution to offer. That's important. What I have is recognition. I am learning, slowly, to let meaning come from attention instead of impact, from curiosity instead of necessity. Some days I fail at that. Some days I revert to old habits. But other days, something unexpected happens. I feel less pressured to perform being someone and more willing to inhabit being someone. That's new for me. Aging didn't take my value. It took the scaffolding I used to measure it. And now I have to decide quietly what stands without it. That's the part no one prepared me for. Not the slowing down, not the letting go, but the moment when you realize your life is no longer being evaluated and you still have to live inside it honestly.